got to remember the law of the farm. You cannot sow something today and reap tomorrow. A seed has to go through various seasons before it turns into a fully blown tree. So is the case with investments.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Today there would be a lot of enthusiasm that today, since the meeting is called on the 26th, just before the budget. So we'll be talking about the budget. Very honestly, we know as much about the budget as anybody else in the audience. Every time when the budget are coming, what is really happening is there are certain wish lists of various organizations of business. Investors want something, someone wants something. So you have TV programs preceding it for 1 month, and people are what will happen, and everyone is guessing what is going to happen and what is not going to happen. So first you have people wishing for something. Then people will be forecasting. And when the budget is, when the speech is being announced, you have a lot of experts coming and commenting on how the budget is. Actually the comments are a result of how the Sensex is moving that day. Then only people realize whether it's a good budget or a bad budget. Because at that point of time, you find the tickers going up and down. So then people, if they see 300 points up, then it seems to be a good budget. But actually no one knows, because the budget is being announced, the speech is coming, and there is no knowledge with anybody about how the markets, what the budget is really exactly. The real value of a budget comes is when the experts sit on it. After the draft copy comes, they study it. So it actually takes about 48 hours for everyone to digest what is really in the budget. And if you even notice it this time, initially you will have euphoria going down. Afterwards, when the fine print is read, then you have the markets improving. Now, why budget is really not important is because if you see since independence, whatever has been told in the budget, especially about the fiscal deficit, it is never under control. But when the finance minister says he has a plan to get it under control, you have the markets going up. At the end of the year, ultimately nothing happens. This is the track record of all our finance ministers. As early as in 2000, there was a plan to make Bombay as the financial hub. Nothing has happened. Then there was that fiscal debt management or something like that. Nothing has happened. So many ministers have changed, nothing has happened. And why is this disconnect? Actually, we have 5-year plans. And these 5-year plans lay down the roadmap of what the budget should be. So unless those two are linked properly, we are never going to go anywhere. So this year, let's hope, everyone is hoping that the Modi government will do something drastic. Whether he does it or not, we will only come to know on Monday actually. Because Saturday is the budget, by Monday we will really know what's happening. Today we had the rail budget. Every BJP guy said it was a great budget. Some press also said it was a great budget. But the opposition, as it is the business, they all were telling that it's not a nice budget. So, what we are going to do today is not going to talk about the budget. It's wasting time. So, Rajiv has prepared a presentation on this company, Apple. Most of us over here would be Apple fans. Either we have Apple computers we use in the office, or we have your iPhones or your iPads. and I'm sure this is going to be much more interesting than talking or forecasting about how the budget is going to be. Rajat, please.
Good evening. This is actually a store of Apple. So it's their store in Istanbul. It's a company which has these beautiful stores, which makes these beautiful products in terms of earlier iPods, then MacBooks, iPhone, iPad, watches to come. We are going to look at it from the investment point of view. So just like some time back, we had the acronym BRICS, which stood for initially Brazil, Russia, India, China, then they added South Africa. Someone has coined this term GAFA, the GAFA world or the GAFA economy, which is Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon. Probably you can add another A after it if you want to add Alibaba, maybe other companies will get added to it. We've already discussed Google at some length earlier. Today we are looking at Apple. It is said that these companies dominate the world, and well, that may be some exaggeration, but it's not completely untrue. Let's look at this amazing company today. When I prepared the presentation, the market cap was about 745 billion. Probably now it's about 780. The market cap is more than the GDP of all but 19 countries in the world. They have $178 billion in cash, which is more than the market cap of IBM, which is more than the market cap of maybe 480 out of the S&P 500. I read somewhere something of that sort. In just the last quarter, or in just the September to December quarter, Q4 is a misnomer, I'll come to that. In just the September to December quarter, they had net profits of $18 million. Now, no other company has ever made this kind of a profit in one quarter. 1 billion iOS devices. So iOS devices are iPhones, iPads, and the later generation of iPod touches, etc., which actually have the operating system. 1 billion, which is 100 crores, or close to the population of India or China, slightly less than that. It's an incredible company on all aspects. This is how the revenues have gone. Close to $200 billion in revenue right now, but had probably 10 billion in revenue as late as 2005, September 2005. They have a financial year which runs from 1st October to 30th September. So when we talk of Q4 calendar year, it's Q1 for their financial year. So you have to keep that in mind. Not just in top line, they've grown steadily in bottom line terms as well. In terms of the trailing 12 months, so if we take their first quarter of this financial year, which is 14-15, and the 3 previous quarters, they have earned about $45 billion in terms of net profit. This was maybe $1 or $2 billion 10 years back. So that is the kind of growth that this company has had over the last 10 years. Obviously, when a company has this kind of revenue growth, this kind of profit growth, you would logically expect the market cap also to shoot up. If you look at this red line, somewhere in the year 2000 you could have bought the company for about $8 billion, and if you say market cap is close to 800 billion, it's a 100-fold increase in about 15 years time frame. Look at, and this was at the time of the dot-com boom. So look at where Microsoft was at that point in time. It had a market cap more than $600 billion at that point in time. So today, Apple is more valuable than Microsoft, than ExxonMobil, and it's the most valuable listed company in the world. Yet, very ironically, the stock is not expensive in terms of financial metrics. If we look at price to sales, price to earnings kind of thing. I already mentioned it has about $178 billion in cash. So if you net that off, net market cap $567 billion, not remove the interest income. I was too lazy to work that out, but it wouldn't be a big number. So price earning would be 13 or 15 or whatever you call it. It's not the crazy valuations that you saw in the dot-com days, or it's not the valuations that you see in FMCG kind of companies in India or whatever. It's not that expensive. And it's not that people are saying that it's a mature company and it's a completely saturated company. You are going to see introduction of Apple Watch from April of this year, which has some people very excited. They've got into the contactless payment, which is Apple Pay on iPhones through their watches and all of that. Newspaper reports talk about them working on an electric car version. It's long been rumored that they will come out with a television set which will remove all the clutter of multiple remote controls, one for your DVD player, one for your gaming console, one for your set-top box and so on. It will probably be voice controlled or gesture controlled or whatever. So they keep coming out with new products. If you look at all the GAFA stocks, so if you look at Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, this is the cheapest stock, not in terms of market cap, but cheapest stock in terms of valuation multiples. So if that is the case, what is wrong? Why is the market not valuing Apple as a growth stock, and why am I not recommending a buy, or why don't we own Apple in our fund? So we keep getting this question asked. I don't have a very strong case, so surely I am not recommending that someone should go out and short sell Apple. I am very clearly not in that camp. Maybe it will continue doing well. It's done well so far, maybe it will continue to do well. There are some, what are those reasons? And we'll tangentially look at how Apple differs from the other three companies, which is Google, Amazon and Facebook. If we quickly run through the checklist that Buffett would recommend for any company, and this is one as a non-Buffett type company, but still we'll take the liberty and use this checklist. If you look at the management, it's a management which has good respect in the marketplace. So Steve Jobs earlier and Tim Cook right now, and the engineers are well regarded in terms of their design capabilities and engineering capabilities. And obviously a management team which has grown revenues and profits like this should be doing something right. So broadly management is good. The only quibble that some investment managers and analysts have with Apple is they hold a lot of cash on their balance sheet. They are not paying it out, neither are they buying back stock that aggressively. So this used to be a big fighting point. It has got resolved to a certain extent. Apple is now paying out more as dividend and also buying back its stock. Some of the cash that they own on the balance sheet is held in overseas subsidiaries of Apple. It's not held by the American listed company. It's in the subsidiary company balance sheets. If they were to bring that cash back, they would have to pay a lot of tax on that. So that is one reason why they are not bringing back all the cash to their home country. So broadly, decent management. It has phenomenal return on capital, not very capital intensive. So to manufacture iPhones, iPads, MacBooks and all, people have to put in capital in China. So Foxconn will keep building factories. These people don't manufacture it in the US. So they don't have to put up a lot of capex once they design the products and once they create the product. Return on capital is high. As I mentioned, net cash, so obviously no debt on the balance sheet on a net basis. And end of the day, it's not a very difficult business. You know what they make. You know they make these phone devices and iPad computers and MacBooks and all that. Valuation, we have gone through it. It's not too expensive. Some would say it's very attractive. So that leaves only one question remaining on the Buffett checklist. Where will the company be after 10 years, or where is the moat? Is there some competitive advantage that this company have over its competitors that will enable the company to keep making the current level of profits and even grow profits? So what does the future look like for the company? So we'll basically, rest of the presentation is trying to address this question. Everything else seems to be okay. If you look at broadly the pros and cons, the pros are well known. So customers love it. I don't think you have any other product in recent memory where you hear people queuing up outside the store overnight to buy a new release. So whenever a new iPhone is being released, people will, this time around for 6, I think, maybe 3 or 4 days in advance, people started queuing up, and in rain and cold weather and all of that. You don't have equivalent examples. We had people queuing up for Bajaj Chetak scooters in India, but that was a different era. That was because of licensing, not because consumers loved the product so much. People say there is a great ecosystem. This can be questioned, but there is some ecosystem. People say iOS, so the iPhone works well with the MacBook and it works well with the iPad, and there's iCloud which syncs everything together. You take a picture on your iPhone, it can automatically be synced with your computer and so on and so forth. There is some ecosystem. The watch again will work with the phone seamlessly. Apart from the ecosystem, people love it for its design. These are among the most beautiful electronic devices. So earlier people used to say this about Sony products. So Sony television sets, for example, always sold at a premium to the normal television sets, and they had a unique design and unique features in their products. Also, people talk about how Apple is taking bulk of the profits of the mobile ecosystem. People say, Android may have maybe 60-70% market share, or whatever the market share, 80% in some markets. Most of the profits are coming to Apple. The other manufacturers are not earning those kind of profits, and we have seen the profit numbers of Apple. So people say, forget the market share. Why do you obsess about market share? as long as someone is exceedingly profitable, you have to buy those companies. So someone will be a Rolls Royce and a BMW, and someone will be a Maruti. If Rolls Royce and BMW are very profitable, why do you care about market share? Why do you care about Maruti? iPhone 6 again has broken all past records of which Apple itself had set earlier. So these are broadly the bull arguments. I already mentioned the watch and the television and electric car and whatnot. We will today take a look at some of the arguments on the other side and the reasons why. If you want to buy Apple, you have to convincingly answer these questions, and you have at least to keep these at the back of your mind so that you are alert as to how things are changing in the marketplace. We'll broadly look at concepts like disruptive innovation. We'll look at things like closed versus open architecture. We'll look at the phenomena of third-party apps replacing original apps. We'll look at the subsidy ecosystem. We'll look at the upgrade cycle and what that means. And we'll look at the high margins that are there for Apple currently. So although I have not listed out all these in separate slides, later on we'll keep coming back to this slide and see whether we have ticked off some of these points. So what is the business of Apple? Let's break down where the revenue is coming from. They are obviously in the manufacture of devices. Some people would say they are also in services and they are also in a broader ecosystem. But I would say they are primarily in the business of devices. We look at why that is the case. This is Q4 of calendar year 2014, first quarter of the current financial year for Apple. This is iPhone sales, 69%. iPad, Mac, other products, services. So services are about 6% of their total revenue in the quarter which has just gone by, last reported quarter. If we look at for the last financial year, which is till 30th September 2014, again services were only 10% of the overall revenue. So between 90 and 95% of the revenue for Apple comes from devices. It's not predominantly a services company. So irrespective of what you hear about sale of music on iTunes or video rentals on iTunes or Apple Pay and the fee that Apple gets from Apple Pay and contactless payment and all that, main revenue is devices. Let's keep that at the back of the mind. This is one conclusion. To understand whether Apple is sustainable or not, or whether Apple can grow further or not, let's understand something about iPhone. Look at some history and some background about iPhone. Or let's go even back further. Let's look at Apple itself. So Apple was a company founded by Steve Jobs with other founders. He became too arrogant in between and he was thrown out from his own company. He was thrown out from Apple as a CEO. Then he went and founded some other companies which he then sold off. In the meantime, Apple almost went bust. Steve Jobs was called back as a CEO and then he had a second stint at Apple. In the second stint at Apple, the first product which they got right and from where the fortunes revived was iPod. This category did not exist earlier. People were listening to music on their CD players or cassette players. MP3s had come, but that was largely being stored on PCs. You did not have too many well-functioning portable MP3 players. Some attempts were made, but consumer acceptance was not there. So iPod was the first mass market successful MP3 player. Around the same time, mobile phones were growing. The number of mobile phones sold were growing, and a lot of people had this idea that why not put a MP3 player on a mobile phone itself. So Motorola approached Apple saying, why don't you allow us to put your iTunes kind of software on our Motorola phones? And they actually had one phone which came in, I don't remember the name now, Rocker or something like that. There was some Motorola phone which came out with some limited music features in collaboration with Apple. But meantime, Apple was working on its own phone device. How could they marry the iPod features with the phone features so that consumers don't have to go around with two devices? One device will serve both the purposes that the consumer has. And not only iPod plus phone, they also were creating a virtually complete internet device. Till that time you had BlackBerry phones in the marketplace, which was mainly used by the corporate types for their company emails. You had Nokia phones which had some limited internet capabilities, but browsing the internet on the phones was very painful at that time. One, speeds were very low, the browsers were not that good, applications were were mainly non-existent. So in this kind of a marketplace, Apple came out with a iPhone device. At that time, Apple went and spoke to AT&T, saying this is the device that we are going to launch in the marketplace. Do you want to sign an exclusive deal with us for this device, iPhone? Now, if we look at the American cellular telephony market, it's a market where the device and the service is bundled together. Devices are usually not sold separately. So usually people buy a device from a phone company rather than a third party store. So if someone wants a phone, they'll go to the AT&T store. It's like going to Airtel and buying a phone, or going to Idea or Vodafone and buying a phone, rather than going to Hirapanna and buying a phone, or going to Chroma and buying a phone. What happened in the negotiation is shrouded in secrecy. Only some tidbits keep coming out. But essentially, there was an exclusive deal between AT&T and Apple. What this meant was that iPhones would not be available on other networks. iPhones would exclusively be available on AT&T networks, and AT&T would subsidize the iPhones. So essentially, this is the current pricing. Even at that time, pricing would have been something similar. So essentially, consumer paid about $200 upfront for an iPhone. $200 is not that high to buy a new device, but at the same time, that person would have to sign some contract for 2 years, committing a minimum spending, which would be for data, SMS plus talk time. So all these three things bundled together. Now, what this did for AT&T and what this did for Apple was amazing. Because the device was revolutionary, because iPhone did not exist in the market at that point in time, or something similar did not exist, there was a big rush of consumers for iPhone. And since iPhone was not available on competing network, AT&T gained a lot of customers. So one side, AT&T was gaining market share, was gaining customers. Second side, Apple, because of its innovation, because of its first mover advantage, was able to sell these phones at a big premium. So $200 was not what Apple was getting. Apple was obviously selling it at a much higher price. The balance was being subsidized by AT&T, and which would recover it over a period of time. That was a deal, and that is the background of iPhone. Just look at this. So Steve Jobs has negotiated an exclusive deal with Apple, with AT&T. What would the other telephone companies do in such a scenario? They can't keep selling Blackberries and Nokias. They have to come out with a good product which can take iPhone head on. They need a communication device, a music player, something which can run all these apps, effectively act like a computer, because otherwise they would be toast. So around this time, Google started developing Android. iPhone, of course, had a big head start. iPhone was far ahead of what Android could offer at that point in time. But the other people could not sit quietly. They had to develop an alternative. Otherwise, they would be irrelevant in the marketplace. So somewhere the seeds for Android were sown because of this exclusive deal. If iPhone had said we will be available on all platforms, then the urgency to create an alternative would not have been there. If you look at any market share data, you will see that market share of iPhone is huge in USA, and in Europe it's not that big. In India it's very small. So what is it that causes Americans to love iPhone so much, and just why don't Italians like iPhone so much? So I came across this chart. I have not created it. I was just searching for something and it randomly popped up on the internet. The data is also a bit old, but just for comparison, these are the prices currently. iPhone $200, of course, with contract, with a 2-year contract. In Italy, it has a price of $831. In India, $785. So it's, rather than national pride, it's got something to do with economics. So look at the market shares. This chart, as I said, I came across it on the internet. Wherever there are subsidies by the carrier, by the phone companies, iPhone share is big. Wherever the consumer pays the full price, the market share of Apple is low. I explained why AT&T did this deal, because they were the only people who had such a magnificent device. Everybody else was on an older technology. The question is, does it make sense today for carriers to subsidize a device like an iPhone? Today, that period of exclusivity is over, so iPhone is available on almost all the networks in USA. The other ecosystem, which is Android ecosystem, has grown, has improved. It has gone through various versions. Cheaper Android devices are available. So today, the deals that the phone companies were making for subsidizing iPhones are actually now giving away the value that they could have otherwise captured to a phone manufacturer. So most of the profits are going to the device manufacturer, and the service provider is not getting that big share of a profit. So wherever the exclusive deals are not there, those markets are not getting into the exclusive deals in a big way. So in India, for example, you don't have exclusive deals. You can buy a unlocked iPhone and use it on any network. So here you don't have a big element of subsidy. Even in the developed market and even to some extent in the USA, there is a move now away from subsidies. So some networks are saying we'll offer cheaper data plans to consumers rather than give them these devices. Let the consumer buy whichever device they want. We'll compete on the cheaper tariff plans. That is already happening today. So we look at some of these two terms, upgrade cycle and disruptive innovation. If you remember the evolution of personal computers, the first popular version of Windows came about somewhere this time, early 90s kind of thing. Windows 3.1 was probably the first operating system with its GUI and all that, which took off. And at that time you had these Intel chips, 386 and 486. So what happened was, in the initial years, the operating system itself went through a lot of revisions, and the chip itself went on improving with the Moore's law and what not. The chip speeds kept improving. So you had Windows 3.11, 95, 98, 2000, XP, Vista, Windows 7, 8, all of that, and you had 486, Pentium, Celeron, Pentium 2 and all of that. So every 1 or 2 years, people would end up upgrading their PC. They would discard their old computer and they would buy a new PC, because the old computer had a older chip, had lesser RAM and lesser hard disk capacity. The new operating system would require a computer with better specifications. So that upgrade cycle went from 92 to somewhere 2001. So about 9 years, that upgrade cycle went like clockwork. Somewhere 2001, people said, ultimately what are we doing on the PCs? We are doing the same Word, same Excel, same internet access, same PowerPoint. What does a new version bring to us? What is the added benefit to us? They may say now this is single core and dual core and quad core and whatnot. But as consumers, we are not gaining any advantage. And coincidentally, this operating system Vista in 2006 was so bad that people said that this is a disaster. We would rather stick to a older operating system which is better, and the upgrade cycle simply stopped somewhere thereabouts. So that Microsoft market cap chart, partly it's flat to downwards because of the dot-com boom, but also the upgrade cycle stopped. People would not pay more money to buy a newer version of an operating system, and people said we don't need faster chips. Faster chips had their own issues. They would heat, they would generate a lot of heat, they required a lot of power, and so on. So somewhere the upgrade cycle stopped here in about 9 years' time. And upgrade cycle is something peculiar to the electronic device industry. If you look at Swiss watches, if you look at the ad for this company, it says you never actually own this watch. You merely look after it for the next generation. So in a Swiss watch, the positioning is that you pass it from generation to generation, whereas in the electronic device, the objective is to get you to buy a new one every 1 or 2 years. So we keep this at the back of our mind, the concept of upgrade cycle. It works well till it works, and sometimes it may not work. So you need to be aware of this phenomenon. Now let's look at another concept called disruptive innovation. There is a book on this subject for those who are keen on reading more about this. There is a short video on this. We'll just go through this.
does a small, young company beat an industry giant on its own turf? Through what Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen calls disruptive innovation. It works like this. Big players focus on sustaining innovation, upgrading existing products and services to attract higher-paying customers. But soon, they start to ignore all the regular customers who just want simple, low-cost alternatives. That's where the entrepreneurial company jumps in with that basic offering. The big guys stay focused on profitable customers and begin to overserve, adding bells and whistles no one wants to pay for. Meanwhile, the disruptor improves its product to appeal to more people. By the time the incumbent notices, the disruptor has already started to take over the market. The classic example is the steel mini mills, which first produced low-quality rebar, then moved to sheet steel, stealing business from the large mills that had been dominant. More recent disruptors include car makers like Toyota and Hyundai, which launched with economy models that added luxury features and brands. The only way for industry giants to fight back is by launching their own disruptive innovations. To succeed, they must treat the project as a separate unit with a different business model and growth expectations. Ask, what job do customers need to get done? Segment customers by job, not by product, market size, or demographics. And develop basic, low-cost ways to get the job done. That's how Procter & Gamble came up with Crest White Strips, a cheap, do-it-yourself alternative to an expensive dental service. Disruptive innovation creates new markets and reshapes existing ones. To achieve growth in a fast-changing world, you want to be a disruptor. Don't be disrupted.
So let's look at these two companies. Let's look at IBM and Infosys. IBM has been around for many decades. They are the people who actually created the computers and all that, from punch card days to mainframes and whatnot. But a low-cost company like Infosys, which started out doing Y2K work and low-end work initially, effectively said we can offer the same quality or slightly lower quality work that IBM is doing by sending people from India or doing work offshore in India at a far lower cost. Why don't you give us the work? And they kept gaining market share, and people like IBM and EDS and Accenture and all had trouble. They got into the pricing war then later on. If we look at Apple itself, if we look at iPad versus the laptops as they were at that point in time, iPads were cheaper than laptops. iPads had lower hard disk capacity. iPads had lower chip speed of the processor. So if you had Intel Pentium 4 and quad-core processors and all that, there was not much of processing capacity on iPad. Still, iPad gave people what they wanted. They were always on. You did not require too much of boot time. You could just press the button and it was on. They were extremely mobile. You could carry them comfortably wherever you wanted. And they, at a lower price point, addressed the customer need, what the laptops were not offering them. And the whole market went topsy-turvy. So laptops had a flattish sale trend or sometimes even declined, whereas iPad created a category of its own. So it was a disruptive innovation from Apple. The question is, can Apple be disrupted today? That is a question. So some of you would have received this forward in WhatsApp or something. The top part is Maslow's hierarchy in terms of food, shelter, clothing and self-actualization, this need. To that, people have added Wi-Fi and battery as basic needs of humans in the world today. And which is actually true. At any airport or railway station or whatever, rail budget today talks about Wi-Fi being provided on railway stations. whether you are at the doctor's reception or at some event, people are rushing for plug points and whatnot to charge their batteries, and people are looking for Wi-Fi signals. This chart came to my mind when I was looking at the launch of iPhone 6. Our televisions were not showing the live telecast of the launch, so I was watching it on the internet, and on side Twitter was there showing what is the reaction of the people. So there was a very interesting tweet at that point in time when Tim Cook said, "Oh, this is the magical iPhone 6 and thinnest ever and whatnot." Someone actually tweeted, he said, "Your customers will cry tears of joy if you make a thicker iPhone but which has a battery which lasts one full 24-hour cycle without having to rush to recharge the battery." And a few days later I noticed Parag bhai, he had his iPhone, a very slim phone, but on the back of it he had stuck a battery pack. So you pay a very expensive price to buy the thin iPhones, and then you stick all the battery packs, or you take the rechargers and run around with wires. So today the customers don't want a more expensive phone, don't want a thinnest phone. Today customers they have all the features they need. They want more battery life, and which is what is not being addressed. For a long time people wanted larger screens, which the Android ecosystem was offering. Apple kept saying, no, customers want a phone which will fit in one hand. They kept making fun of phones with larger screens. Finally they realized they are losing market share, came with larger screens. For a long time they made fun of the 7-inch tablets. They said, oh, iPad with its 10-inch tablet is the gold standard. Why would anyone want a 7-inch tablet? Finally, they saw they were losing market share. They came out with iPad mini. Today, people want by default phones with dual SIM capabilities. Now, even if normally you have only one SIM card or only one phone number, let us say you have gone abroad for international travel. You don't want to run up a huge roaming bill on your home country phone. So a dual SIM would help. You have your home country number, you also buy a local SIM, put it in. You can use SIMs as per convenience. So a lot of things which the other players are coming out with, Apple is either ignoring completely or is introducing them late today. So things like dual SIM, more battery life, removable batteries which people can swap easily, provision for a memory card where you can upgrade memory at will, so on and so forth. Also, if you remember Microsoft in the early days, it was a closed ecosystem. A Microsoft software would work only with Microsoft and so on. We couldn't take it across platforms. Today, Apple is doing the same thing. Whether it's FaceTime you can use with another iOS device. You can't use with a Windows phone or with a Android phone. iCloud works only on the iOS device. Whereas if you look at, same was the case with BlackBerry. BBM worked only with Blackberries at that point in time. So when WhatsApp came in, which gave across the platform functionality, BBM went into irrelevance. So today, people rather than using iCloud would use Dropbox, because that goes to their Windows computers, that goes to their Android phones or Android tablets, iOS phones, iOS tablets. It's cross-functional. And the other companies are realizing this. So today, at a late stage, BlackBerry is saying use BBM wherever you want. We will allow that functionality. Microsoft Microsoft is saying use Outlook on your iPads and iPhones, use Microsoft Office wherever you want. Google is already doing that. Maps are available across platforms. YouTube is available across platforms. Apple is one company which is sticking to a closed ecosystem. And there are products out there which are equally good looking, equally functional and available at much lower prices. So this guy is the founder of what is called Apple of China. It's a company called Chowmi, pronounced as Xiaomi, Xiaomi. In India, you would have heard of Redmi and Mi3 and Mi4. These phones are not available in stores. They come on these online portals for flash sales, and maybe 25,000 phones, 30,000 phones get sold in a matter of seconds, and people buy those. We have one of them in the audience, so you can take a look if you want. Now these phones cost around 8,000 or 10,000 rupees and have functionality which is very similar to some of the very expensive phones, and more importantly have all those features: very long battery life, dual SIMs, removable battery, expandable memory, and so on and so forth. And it's not just this company. There are various players in the ecosystem. So this is Xiaomi, this is Kareena Kapoor advertising for eyeball, and the HTC. Sony again, which has been the inspiration for Apple, itself is in the mobile device business still. It also makes some beautiful phones. Motorola, Carbon. So at various price points, various features, there are competitors around for Apple. It's not a one-way street. So Apple has to keep answering this question: what's new? As we saw, Apple is mainly a devices company. It's not a services company. So to maintain the existing revenue level and existing profit level, they have to sell as many devices each year and keep growing the number of devices sold. They can't rest on the device sale of last year. They have to sell the devices today. So they have to keep introducing fabulous products. They have to get high margins. They have to keep convincing customers that you should upgrade. So if someone has bought an iPad 6 years back or 5 years back and that person is happy with the iPad, that is not Apple's success. They have to make the person overall be happy with the products but feel unsatisfied. They want to make him feel the need for discarding the old model and buying a new model. And they are already facing problems in the tablet space. They are saying that the upgrade cycles in tablets are not that great. People buy that, they are happy with what they own, and they keep using it for a number of years. So they are not seeing growth there, they are seeing degrowth over there. So basically it's a question on how long will the iPhone upgrade cycle last. That is the key question for Apple. And we have already seen this happen. Laptops, people don't upgrade that frequently now. People are happy with what they own. Printers, people don't keep upgrading. As long as it keeps printing, that device stays where it is. Digital cameras, again, people don't keep upgrading it anymore. And in some cases, they have been upstaged by cell phone cameras. iPod as a category has gone down because you don't need an iPod when music features are available on your phones. iPads I already mentioned, they are facing difficulty in the upgrade cycle. So this brings us to an important difference between A and GFA. So Apple is different from Google, Facebook and Amazon. Google, Facebook and Amazon are trying to sign up more and more consumers, and build loyal customers who will keep giving them annuities. So Amazon will try to sign up people for Amazon Prime. It will give them free shipping, it will give them free unlimited media consumption in terms of movies and music and books and all that. Google wants people to sign up to its Gmail, Maps, Google Plus and whatnot, and basically be in the ecosystem so that they can keep advertising to that customer and keep selling things to that customer somewhere down the line. Facebook again wants people to sign into Facebook or WhatsApp and be in the ecosystem. They are looking at creating loyal customers, whereas Apple is trying to extract the maximum margin today out of that customer. That's the big difference. There is open system versus closed architecture. So the Amazon app will be available on all devices, all operating systems. Facebook will be available on all devices, all operating systems. Google is available all devices, all operating systems. Apple says, buy my product, only then you can use my services. Otherwise, I will not allow you to use the service. So, GF&A are trying to create habits in their customers to interact with them. Apple is trying to get the customers onto a device upgrade cycle. You have bought my product 2 years back, now discard that product and buy a new product afresh from me. That is the objective that Apple is in. Again, one of the reasons why there is not much profitability in Facebook and Amazon, and to an extent profit of Google are suppressed, is that they are spending huge money in R&D or in things that they believe will pay off in the future. One way of looking at it is GF&A are wasting money. Other way of looking at it is they are investing money. Apple, one way of looking at it is they are stewards of shareholder wealth. They are taking care of the shareholder wealth well and conserving cash. The other way of looking at it is they are not investing for the future at all. So where will the significant growth come from? So these are the questions. So we have seen disruptive innovation, closed open architecture, okay, third party apps replacing original apps. One risky thing for Apple, in my view, is that whether you own a Apple device today or whether you own an Android device today, for you the user experience is not that different as long as the apps you are using are the same. So whether you use Android or Apple, you will use the same WhatsApp, you will use the same Google Maps, you will use the same Uber or Ola to hail a cab, you will use the same Make My Trip app to book tickets. So the apps are available on both the platforms. Initially, Apple had a huge advantage. One, the operating system was of a far higher quality. Android was a Faltu OS when it was first introduced, and the applications for Android were far limited. Today, there is maybe 99.9% overlap between apps for the two ecosystems. There would be very few apps that are available on one and not available on the other, and some of them would be the proprietary apps, so FaceTime or things like that, iCloud and so on. So which is, according to me, a risk. One of the moats that Microsoft had at that time is that most of the programs were written for Microsoft, and anyone who wanted to move from Microsoft could not move because all the programs were there. Today, anyone who wants to move from one ecosystem to the other, the process is very simple, because end of the day, your data or your subscriptions lie in the apps rather than in the operating system. So which again does not create that big enough moat for Apple. So the last slide, the $1 trillion question today is, will consumers keep paying $700, $800 every 2 years to upgrade their iPhone? That is question one. Second is, will Apple be able to keep creating new devices that consumers love and consumers queue up for? So if your answer is yes to both these questions, Apple is very cheap, you can go out and buy it, it will create a lot of wealth. If your answer is no, the upgrade cycle is coming to an end, then maybe the share prices will fall. My answer is I don't know. So since I don't know whether it's a very attractive company to buy or it's a company to stay away from today. It's a company which is very interesting. I am watching it closely, but I don't have the confidence one way or the other. Thank you. I think I have overshot by about 5 minutes. If you have any questions, I'll take those, or we can interact over slides.
What is the R&D expense for Apple per year?
I don't remember offhand, but it's maybe $6-7 billion a year. It's less than what the others are spending. So
Less than Google?
Less than Google, despite much higher.
I was reading this article by Talib. He was actually saying, speaking similarly to the point that you made, since Apple has the most cash, would you call this a moat if they, like Google and other people, would invest in other ventures, unrelated areas, and as soon as something scales up somewhere, they would sort of go and buy it, So overall, can cash be a moat if you're shooting in so many different places that ultimately the chances are that you have more mathematical odds than another company because you have more cash, that something will come through.
That is what GFA are doing. That is what Google is doing. That is what Amazon is doing. That is what Facebook is doing. So, who acquired WhatsApp for $19 million? Facebook did. Now, you can argue it was a smart decision or stupid decision. That's a separate matter. But the other three are trying to redeploy cash in sensible manner and in trying to create what Taleb would call positive black swan events. So, or anti-fragile things. Apple has had a couple of acquisitions. One was that Beats Music and then that headphone company and all of that. But they are not that aggressive. They are sticking close to their knitting. They are saying we will keep making devices and we will buy things in the adjacent areas. They are not taking those big moonshots. The only surprising thing that I came across was they are working on that car, which was something of a surprise for me. But otherwise, in their behavior, I don't see them trying to do too many different things.
But Rajiv, this FaceTime, can it be copied by other people?
Whatever is there in FaceTime is already there. So Skype is there, which is across platforms. So FaceTime is like BlackBerry Messenger and Skype is like WhatsApp. So FaceTime works only if you have an Apple device and I have an Apple device. But if either one of us have a non-Apple device, then only Skype would work. So Skype is the far more popular platform. That's the difference between the open architecture versus closed architecture.
Rajiv, I agree with you 100%. I mean, in the sense, you may have a doubt what will happen. But my personal thinking is because a lot of people whom I know, they all have iPhones. I have a Samsung Duo which costs 8,000 rupees. The apps it has is, I can't even use 1% of that. The question is, no, you're saying it has 300,000 apps. Who in this room is using more than even 500 apps? Forget about
all those 300,000 apps are available on both.
That's what I mean.
So they are over engineering in my view.
Yeah.
They are extracting a premium where probably it's not justified. So after seeing the 8,000 rupee Xiaomi phone and looking at the new phones that Apple introduces, I think mainly the loyalty or the craze for Apple is driven by subsidy. If you get iPhone 6 in $200, if I was offered iPhone 6 at $200, I would go and buy it. $200 is what? 12,000 rupees.
Yeah.
So then I wouldn't think twice. But versus 60,000 rupees, sure, you have to consider other.
It's relating to the point you just mentioned, that is this a subsidy? For example, would a entry-level BlackBerry with an AT&T plan for 2 years be available at $100?
Zero.
Let's say zero plus $45 a month. Is that
So it's very opaque.
Yeah.
The customers are not able to make out how much they are actually paying for the device.
Yeah.
Now that has changed. Some carriers are saying, rather than subsidize it, instead of giving a $45 plan, can I give a $15 plan or a $25 plan?
So then in that sense, is it really truly a subsidy, or is it kind of an EMI that the financing that the telecom service provider is giving?
It's an EMI in the garb of a subsidy. So the customer is not realizing that he is effectively taking a loan and paying the EMI. It's disguised. So in the customer's mind, he is paying only $200 for the phone, and the $45 he is paying is for voice, SMS and data. Now when the customer clearly knows that only $15 is for voice, data and SMS, and $30 a month is for the device, then the decision could be different.
Thank you.
You got to remember the law of the farm. You cannot sow something today and reap tomorrow. A seed has to go through various seasons before it turns into a fully blown tree. So is the case with investments.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.